Well, welcome to United States history. If you're taking this course, basically I'm going to take you through 7 different units of learning, and in the end, you will be prepared to pass the United States Regents examination. Unit 1 is going to be a short one. It's simply about the geography and the development of the United States. So we'll go through a general unit overview for you, some key concepts, and we'll get into a formal lecture on the geography of the United States and how that influences the history that you are about to learn. So the first things is the unit overview. This unit provides a general review of the physical and cultural geography of the United States. It also reviews some of the ways in which geography has influenced the history of the country. Geographers are going to use 5 themes to study an area. 5 themes are location, place, movement, regions, and human-environment interaction. And throughout this lecture, we're going to give you examples of all 5 of those so you're prepared for them when you see them throughout the course. All right. There are some key questions relating to the nation's geography. Each question relates to one of the 5 geographic themes. The one thing I would do if I were you in terms of studying is by the end of this unit, you may want to come back to this slide, which I'll make available for you. And you may want to go back to those questions to see, can you answer them? Can you give examples of exactly what is being asked? So kind of go through them now for you. Where is the United States located? We'll talk about location in a minute. Both absolute location and relative location. How has the country's relative location changed over time? Our nation began very small, and over time we've gotten larger, and our influence has gotten larger. So you'll see how that relative location is going to change. What are the physical and human characteristics of the United States? We'll talk both about the physical nature of the country and exactly what we have in America. How have people, goods, and ideas moved between places? So in talking about transportation, getting from A to B in certain parts of our nation, that's very easy. In other parts, it's very difficult. How are places within the United States similar to and different from other places? So we have some similarities, and we definitely have some differences in this nation. It's a very large nation. How have people in the United States interacted with the natural environment? And that's going to be key as we progress in the nation. Geography and the environment is really going to dictate what we can and can't do. All right, so be aware of those questions, and once again, you may want to refer to them. All right, now moving on to some key concepts or key themes here. All right, you got physical, you have immigration, you got places and regions. So let's take the physical systems first. The question arises, how have the nation's systems of mountains and waterways influenced the development of the country? I can't tell you how important this is. All right, as you look at a map, which we will in a couple slides, you'll see, you basically, geography is going to tell you what you can and can't do. And you have to be aware of what the geography or the physical systems of the country are. So we'll see that in a minute. Immigration and migration. Immigration, once again, people moving to America from other countries. Migration, people who are already living in America, moving to a different part of America. And there's going to be some reasons behind that, right? What have been the major patterns of immigration and movement of people over the course of the country's history? There will definitely be some questions on your final exam based on the movement of people, right? Whether it be foreigners coming into the country or people who are living here who are just moving to a different part of America. And then we have places and regions. What different types of regions exist within the United States? North, south, east, west, mountainous, flatlands. There are many different regions within the country, and you may want to be aware of some of those. All right. So first things first, we're going to work on the 5 themes that geographers use. The first is location. Yeah, this is pretty easy. If you think about absolute location versus relative location. Absolute, where is America? Well, we're located in the northern and western hemispheres. We are located on the continent of North America, and we're bordered by 2 very large oceans, right? The Atlantic Ocean on our east coast and the Pacific Ocean to the west coast. We'll kind of see that Pacific Ocean come into play in terms of manifest destiny or moving westward towards the Pacific. Then we have relative location. And just in general terms, they're talking here, geographers. Well, where are we? We're south of present-day Canada. We're north of present-day Mexico. But our country, based on our boundaries that have changed, our relative location will change over the time. we've gotten larger, so our location has changed. And we don't seem to be that far off from other places of the world today because of communication developments. I mean, China, back in the 1700s was so far away from us, but now with technology and internet and phones or whatever you want to use, faxes, we can get a hold of whatever. So we're not as distant as we once were based on communication. Pretty simple. Place. Geographers study both the physical and human characteristics of geography. So we're really going to get into that physical nature now. What are physical maps? Well, they show land features such as rivers, mountains, lakes, the physical makeup of the country. And you should be able to point out some of the major features on a physical map. If you can't, we'll be able to do that for you in a second. Political maps are different than physical maps. Political maps are going to be man-made maps, and they're going to illustrate state or country's boundaries. These little lines that we draw that say this is our country, and then here's the line, and that's your country, right? Various political divisions, such as counties and cities. I'm sure you live in a little municipality, and then at some point there's a boundary, and if you cross that boundary, you're in a different city or a town or a village. So those are political maps, they're called, and they're basically man-made boundaries. We also have demographic maps that you'll see throughout this course. And those are maps showing different categories of people, whether that be maybe different age groups, different income levels, education levels. They may be even based on splitting up maybe Democrats and Republicans and things like that. It's just showing who's there, the makeup of the people that's there. Those are demographic maps, all right? So I think I got an example for you here. This is a kind of a two-in-one, if you will, right? This is a physical map. It's also a political map. When you look at it, it's showing you the physical features of the country. I'll point out a couple of them so you're aware. These are the Appalachian Mountains going up on the eastern border of our country over here. Over here you have a couple different sets of mountains. You have the Rocky Mountains coming down here, the Colorado Rockies. And over here you have the Sierra Nevada. So there's two little different mountain ranges hanging out over here, right? Middle of the country are nice flatlands, the grassy plains, the Great Plains they're called. Then we have a couple interesting river systems that you may want to be aware of. The longest river of our nation, the mighty Mississippi, goes all the way down up into the Gulf of Mexico, which is down here. Mississippi is going to be very important for travel and trade in our country. It's the most important river, which will show up in our history. The Ohio River is another important one, which is kind of our gateway to the west. The Ohio got you to the Mississippi. Now you're on the thruway over here. I like to call it the thruway. Then you have the Missouri River, which kind of cruises up through here. So you want to know about the Missouri, the Mississippi, and the Ohio. Those are the three basic or the biggest river systems that are going to influence our nation's history. We also have the Great Lakes, the largest freshwater supply in the world, which is obviously good so we can drink it, and for trade and travel. You're going to have all these Great Lakes shipping boats going through, getting products from east to west in our nation. On the east coast over here, we have the Atlantic Ocean. Should be labeled, but it's not. Over here, we have the Pacific Ocean. Now, in the future, you should be able to look at a physical map of the country without anything labeled and know where those things are. Mississippi, Ohio, Appalachian, Rocky Mountains, Sierra Nevadas. You need to know a little bit about geography to understand what we can and can't do in the country, and I'll show you that in a minute. Now, it's also a political map. Why? We're showing these political divisions of these state boundaries, right? So this right here would be where we live, New York State. I mean, obviously, you can go out over here. You got, Montana up here, and you have this right here is an international border. Canada's up here, and United States is down here. Some of our borders, though, are kind of interesting because they are both a physical border or a physical landmark on a map, like the Rio Grande down here, but it's also a political boundary as well. That is the boundary between Texas and Mexico. So a lot of our state boundaries, these political lines, are going to be drawn up based on the physical features of the country. So that's kind of a two-in-one map for you, all right? We have physical characteristics. What do you need to know? Well, I just went through a couple of them for you on that slide. You have to know the landforms, the water bodies, the vegetation, the climate. There's a variety of landforms that you need to be aware of if you're going to understand American history. The Great Plains or the Central Plains in the Midwest, all right? The Great Plains are going to be up and through here. We call that the breadbasket. And over here we have the Central Plains over here. Good farmland. Guess what they're doing out there, people? That's right. They're firemen. All right. The Ohio, the Mississippi, the Missouri. I showed you where those was. You need to be aware of those for trade and travel, right? And then you have your big mountain system, the Appalachians and the Rocky Mountains. You got the Appalachians over here, and then the Rockies over here. Very important mountain ranges for our nation's history, right? This map, nice. I just threw another one out there for you. You can look these up. You might want to go back to this one and practice. Hey, do I know where things are? Or you can go back to this one and kind of really see, right? Appalachian, the Atlantic, the Pacific, Sierra Nevadas, the Rocky Mountains, the Great Plains, right in through here. Nice flatlands, right? The river systems are tough to see on this map, but there's your Mississippi. There's your Ohio River. It's located right there. It says Ohio going up, and then you have the Missouri coming up over here, right? So those are the physical features of the country. This is also a what? A political map, because do you see the little boundary of Texas there, right? So this would be a dual map as well. Moving on, human characteristics. Pretty easy one. Several waves of immigration have created a different cultural mix of people. They have various languages, they have various customs, various traditions, and different value systems. So we are not a homogeneous group here. We may all be Americans, but there are definitely, we have an eclectic population with a lot of different people, a cultural mix of people. Just be aware of that, because sometimes those cultures are going to mix well, and sometimes they're not. There's going to be some anti-immigration laws that we'll look at later in this class. Movement, very important that you understand that there's the constant movement of people in this country. So throughout this class, there will be a continuous focus on the movement of people. You should focus your attention on 4 items. If you're looking at the movement of people, these are the questions you should be able to ask for yourself, all right? Time, during what time periods are there major shifts in the movement of people? Location, where were people moving to, and where did they come from, right? So you kind of want to know where they're going, where they're coming from, and then where they're moving to. Reasons, this is huge. To pop up a lot of multiple choice questions, things like that. And in terms of the movement of people, we historians, we kind of look at this in terms of push and pull factors, all right? Commonly known as push versus pull factors. Why are people leaving an area, and why are they going to a new one? Right? I live in Buffalo. What's going to push me out of Buffalo? The winters. They're very harsh, and I hate them. Well, I'm going to move where? I'm going to move down to Florida. Why? It's nice and hot down there. So the heat and the sun's going to pull me to Florida. The harsh winter is pushing me out of Buffalo. So those would be examples of push and pull factors. Results? Well, look at the country. What are the changes now that people have moved, right? Something's going to be different inside the country. So keep an eye on that. Time, location, the reasons, and the results. If you know those 4 things in terms of the movement of people, you'll be able to answer any question that's thrown your way, right? We're going to look at 4 different major time periods when people moved. And the first is going way back, about 20,000 to 12,000 years ago. A bunch of hunters from East Asia, thousands of them, crossed this land bridge that was made available by the glaciers and the lowering of our oceans, our water levels. And these people came to the country. They were these Paleo Indians, were the first humans in the Americas. That would be North America, Central America, and South America, and they are the ancestors of the Native American peoples, right? So you want to see that. Here's where we are. Here is the United States. Here's Canada. Here's Central America. South America is down here, not on the map. Here's the Bering Strait right here. So there's water there right now, but they say 20,000 years ago, there was a little land bridge, and people came from over here, and they crossed that land bridge, and then they just filtered in. It's like a funnel. They funneled into all this area here, and they became the Native Americans that Europeans encountered when they came across the Atlantic Ocean. So there's the Bering Strait. Second big wave of movement of people, we have the European exploration and slavery. 2 different groups coming here now. We have the 1500s, the early Spanish explorers. And they started to settle in the Southwest. They started in Florida. St. Augustine was the first permanent Spanish settlement. They built a fort there, and they funneled down into Mexico, and they came and they conquered with the conquistadors, and they tried to enslave the Native Americans, and they killed them by the millions, and the Spanish were bad. But realize where they're settling, down south. Easy way to look at that, in Spain, they speak Spanish. When you look at Mexico or Central America or South America, everybody but Brazil, they all speak what? You got it, Spanish, right? Because that's who settled there. In the 1600s to the 1700s, France and Britain began to say, hey, there's something going on over there. The Spanish are making a mint. They're making a ton of cash, so we got to get in the game. They began to set up colonies along the eastern coast of North America. The French are going to predominantly be kind of north of us. They're going to settle up in Canada. And if you ever go to Canada, you know there's a lot of little municipalities, and where they still speak up there in Canada, they still speak French, right? The British, who speak English, they began to set up in the colonies on the eastern coast of North America, Jamestown being the first. There would be 13 of them, and what do we all speak here? We speak English, like the British speak. So you can tell by the language where people settled back, 400 or 500 years ago, which is kind of neat. Millions of Africans as early as the 1600s were brought to North America unwillingly. They did not want to come. They were forced to be slaves on large plantations for cash crops like tobacco and cotton. And it's kind of a negative part in American history. We have to look at it, though. Is that the movement of people, a different group, going to create different regions? Yeah, so all that's going to come into play, right? So you have that time frames like the 15 and 1600s, right? We move along. We're going to have a migration from our nation moving from the east to the west. When does it happen? During the early to mid 1800s. The promise of land, promise of gold led many Americans and Europeans to move westward. A couple things made this aidable, and that would be the Louisiana Purchase in 1803, doubled the size of the country, and basically said, hey, now that's our land. People began moving out there, all right? Before that time, it was controlled by Spain and France and Spain. It went back and forth a couple times, but in 1803, it's American, so guess what? We're going. Homestead Act, the 1862, Abraham Lincoln, pretty smart dude, love him. He was the president during the middle of the Civil War, and during the second year of the Civil War, he's still focusing on what's best for the nation. The Homestead Act gave a bunch of acres of land, 160 acres of land, to willing families who would move out there and farm it for 5 years. So in 1803, we have the land, and 50 years later here, guess what Lincoln's doing? He said, hey, here it is, go use it. So that's going to encourage people to move out west. Could be an example of a pull factor. Free land from the government, right? And then there's this idea of manifest destiny coined by John O'Sullivan in a New York newspaper. He put it in paper and people started believing it. It was our destiny, right? America should continue to move westward all the way to the Pacific Ocean. And once people start talking about that, like it's in our destiny, guess what? People start believing it and they want to do it, and we end up doing it. Couple things here on the map, if you were to look at where we're at up to this time period. Looking at territorial expansion, you kind of need to be aware of when we got these chunks, all right? First chunk here we got when we declared our independence and won the American Revolution. That's the United States. We signed the Adams-Onis Treaty in 1819, where we kind of got Florida from Spain. And who's happy about that? Old people. What do old people do when they retire? They move where? To Florida, right? So America cheered because we had a place to put our old people. I'm kidding. I'll be there shortly. 1803, we talked about that. Thomas Jefferson bought the Louisiana Purchase, so that doubled the size of the country, made a lot of people over here move where? Move out west, right, to Louisiana. We got Texas from the Mexicans in 1845. We fought a war against Mexico, and then at that war, we gained that little chunk of land, 1848. And then we settled a contract with a treaty with the British in 1846 and got the Oregon Country. What's happening? We're moving from the East Coast to the West Coast. What do historians call that? Manifest destiny. You got it, right? We'll talk about that Gadsden Purchase later on. We bought from the Mexicans, 1853. The only thing not here, I put a big X here because it's not here yet, are two pieces we did not have yet. That would be Alaska and Hawaii. So we'll deal with that at a later date. Last migration. Oh, there's two more really. African American migration. We find that a bunch of African Americans are going to move. Where are they moving from? When we talk about movement, we got to move from and to, right? They're moving from the South to the Northeast and the Midwest to get kind of factory jobs, right? Economic opportunities. When? 1890 to 1920. So this would be after the Civil War. There's another major migration to the north in the 1940s during World War too. What's available in those economic opportunities? What's available? Jobs and factories, right? And if you were African American down south during those time periods, things weren't looking too good for you. So if you could get out, you did. Where'd you go? You went to the north. You went to the Midwest to get those factory jobs. Then we have the Sun Belt. Since 1950, there has been a steady movement of Americans from the industrial cities of the North and Midwest down to the southern states, stretching from Florida to California. What do we call that? We call that the Sun Belt. Very easy. Why do we call that? Well, it's sunny down there, right? It's pretty easy. So we'll talk about a couple of belts coming up. Regions. Regions can be defined by cultural characteristics such as landforms or climate. Obviously, we just gave you one region, right? The Sun Belt. That's a region. It's a general area that's kind of the same. It can be defined by the cultural characteristics such as the economy or the political organization of that area. It can also, once again, geography will often dictate what we can or can't do. I mean, you have a lot of farms down south. I don't see too many farms up north in, say, January, right? How many farms in New York City in January? How many? Look out your window. How many? None, right? Because the climate doesn't allow for that to happen, right? So when we look at regions, you might want to take a peek at America. This should not be surprising to you that there's not a lot of farms over here. Because what's here? Yeah, you got it. The Rocky Mountains. How many farms on the mountains? None, right? So when we look at what we can do, geography, climate, the heat, the amount of rainfall are going to determine what we do in any given area, right? Obviously, down south, you have this light blue down here. Is there a lot of farms down south? Sure, mixed farming is there, right? Dairying, we have, milk. Does the body good. We have a lot of dairy farms in New York. Here's New York State right here. It's where your cows are living, right? Livestock and feed grains. A lot of flatlands out here. This right here, we talked about the Sun Belt down here, the sunny part. This is the breadbasket of America, the Great Plains or the breadbasket. Why do we call it that? What are we doing? You got the orange is wheat. You got the yellow is wheats and grains and rye, the things we make bread out of, right? Not a lot happening out here. Very mountainous. The Grand Canyon's right here. We got nothing, right? Non-agricultural farm. You got nothing going on over there, right? You can't farm in the Grand Canyon. So when you look at the climate and the geography, you get a feel for that. You might want to spend some time looking at that map just to see exactly what's going on, all right? There's your political and physical map again. We'll go through these belts real quick for you. This is the Sun Belt right here, right? Sunny states, right? Right down here, the Sun Belt. The Grain Belt. The wheat belt, right in here through the Great Plains. They call this the Rust Belt up here. It's a little belt, the Rust Belt. When you look at all those factories that we built in the late 1800s, if you looked at those metal roofs today, all you see is rust. So these are like your factory area right up and through here. This right in through here down in Kentucky and Tennessee, this is called the Bible Belt. People seem to be uber religious down here. You don't mess around down there, right? They love their Bible, the Bible Belt. So you got your little belts in there, right? Sun Belt, Rust Belt, Grain Belt, Bible Belt, right? You got that. Human environment interaction. I kind of just showed you a map on this. What is it telling you? The Middle Atlantic region. The Middle Atlantic region. That's going to be right in here, the Mid-Atlantic. These middle states, right in through here. What's going on there? There's some agriculture. They're developing factories. Pretty simple. Southern colonies. Down south. What do you got? Down here. Down south, right? Large farms, plantation, there's enough rainfall. We know what's going on there, right? Tobacco and cotton farms. South Carolina was ripe for rice cultivation. That was their biggest kind of plantations in South Carolina were rice, which is good because I like rice, Up in New England. How many farms up in New England? There's only farms in the summertime, right? No farms up here in the wintertime. This is New England up here. These New England states, too cold. But if you go right off Cape Cod, guess what's down there? I like to eat it. Lobster, right? So you got fishing and shipbuilding. That's what you got going on. Human environment interaction. The geography, the climate, the heat, the amount of rainfall is going to tell you what you can and can't do. There's your example, right? Last thing we got is tourism and conservation. We do interact with the land sometimes in a very positive way. We have national parks that we developed. Teddy Roosevelt was the first to kind of say, hey, we want to conserve some of this land so we don't waste it all. cut down a tree, let's plant two, right? Let's make sure we have trees 50,000 years from now, right? There's some geographic issues with our environment, though, right? Some of it is very protected, and we leave it alone, and it's great. What else we got? We have waste disposal, air and water pollution, which hampers the environment, energy sources, energy use. We burn coal, we burn fossil fuels, and then our fresh water supply is diminishing. Our population is going up. There's only so much fresh water out there. So there's some things you want to keep in mind. Test tips. Last thing for this unit. Keep in mind the key concepts when thinking about geography of America, right? There's location, there's place, movement of people, regions, human environment interaction. Could you be asked a question on any one of those? Absolutely. Could you go back to the key concept questions and see if you can answer those now? It might be a good idea. But that's a good feel for geography and where we're at. So if you want to watch this video again, that's great. If you want to just move on to Unit 2, that's awesome too. I'll make sure that we keep these videos rolling for you so you have them.